Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of Navola by Paolo Bacigalupi. I am really sorry if I've said that wrong, but I honestly have no idea how to say that surname, even though it is a very beautiful surname. But there we go. So today I'm going to be doing my non-spoiler thoughts on Navola. This is a historical fantasy book. It is a standalone and it has been on my radar for quite a while. And the reason why it was on my radar was because I had read somewhere that the book was very much influenced by Renaissance Italy, Renaissance Europe in general. And as I've mentioned many times on my channel at this point, that is one of my favorite periods of history to read about and to experience. When I think of like that period of history and then tying that in with some fantasy and fantastical elements, I was like, this is like almost like the perfect book for me. And so I picked it up as part of our Patreon buddy read in the month of December. And I have to say, overall, it was just an absolute wild ride. I absolutely loved this book. It was incredible. Like, it was so good. That being said, I don't think this book is actually going to be for a lot of people. I think it's going to be for a particular type of reader. And I think it's one of those books that you kind of just have to trust the process, because it is a very slow book, especially the first like 50 to 60% is very slow. But then you have to kind of trust the author to kind of take us on this journey and make that journey worthwhile. As for what this book is about, we're essentially following our main character, Davico, as he essentially shadows his father, Devonacci de Reguli, as he kind of goes about his political conquests. And this book doesn't really have a plot, I'll be honest. Like, it really does not. We're essentially following the rise and fall of a very powerful family. And this is one of my like favorite story tropes. This is one of my favorite things to read, is when you're following like a really powerful person or group of people. You see their rise and then you see them trying to maintain their wealth and their power, but inevitably you do eventually see their decline as well. And that's exactly what this book is charting. I said before in my December wrap up that if you like The Folding Knife, then this is a book that I think you'd really love, because it really does have quite a few parallels to The Folding Knife. Like, in places it is quite dense. I did love the writing. I think Paolo is a very talented writer. He's able to balance the denser moments where he's kind of info dumping a little bit and kind of helping us understand the broader scope of the world. I would say Parker does the same in The Folding Knife, but they both do it in a way that is very tactful. They both do it in a way that is kind of balanced, so it doesn't feel too dense when you're reading it. The writing is overall just really strong, in my opinion. Like, I wouldn't say Paolo is reinventing the world, but I think he approaches this type of historical fantasy really well. Like, I really enjoyed reading. I never once felt like it was too much. I never once felt like my mind was wandering, which I think is really difficult for this type of story, because you have to keep the reader's interest in the characters. And this is a very character-driven story, if you couldn't tell. Like I said, there's not really much plot, and we're really following Davico, our main character, but we're also really following his father, Devonacci. Let's go on to characters a little bit now. Davico, or Davico, I think it's Davico. Davico is a really great character because he's very young at the start of the book, and he has absolutely like no clue what he's doing, which is understandable because he's a literal child. And we see him smarten up, wisen up as the book progresses. We see him try to imitate his father but fail epically at it. And we start to doubt whether this person, whether this child really has the potential and the capability to step up and take over when his father inevitably dies at some point in the future. I think Davico is quite relatable. I think we can all probably relate to the struggle of trying to, you know, be the future heir. Not necessarily that we're all future heirs, but that we're all trying to impress our parents and show them that we can be an adult before we actually are an adult. And I think he goes through a really interesting arc, and by the end of it we feel a deep sense of empathy for this character, because he goes through so much. So much. I cannot even begin to explain how much this character goes through, because that would be very spoiler filled, but he just goes through so much. But by the end of it, you know that it's for his betterment in a weird way, even though some of it is so horrifying. I want to next talk about his father, Devonacci de Reguli. my favorite character type. I've said this before. My favorite character type is like the very intelligent, very politically adept individual who is probably smarter than everybody else in the room and generally has a lot of power. And Devonacci doesn't fail to be that type of character. He's very much reminds me of Basso, and while he is very intelligent and is probably smarter than everybody else in the room, he also has flaws. His arc is also really, really well done. He's positioned in a way that makes you really like him at certain moments, but also makes you really dislike him at other moments. He's a very morally grey character, and we're at certain moments we're batting for him and we want him to win, but at other moments we also question whether he should win. He's my favorite type of character. I thought he was so well written. I would genuinely love Paolo to write a prequel book about this one character. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was so well done. This book is so political, and we get a really great cast of secondary and tertiary characters. We get some really great female characters as well. Celia, his adoptive sister, is a really well character, and her arc honestly shocked me in like the best way possible, and I won't say more than that. We also have a really great like warrior character who goes by the name of Agon Khan. And I loved his relationship with Davico, but also his father, Devonacci. Like, I think all the characters had really honest relationships with each other. Like, they felt like relationships any one of us could have if we were in that situation. And I think each of the characters and the roles that they played felt really authentic. And that's what I want in this type of story, because I want to feel like I'm going back in time and I'm witnessing this actually happening in real time, if that makes sense. Another thing that I want to talk about as it relates to the writing is I love how there are like layers to this book. So this book is very much told from our main character, Davico, but we also get little vignettes into how other characters are thinking about certain situations. We also get these like little short stories dotted throughout the book that add kind of an extra layer of depth and context and richness to this world that I really appreciated. I love seeing or maybe discovering authors that are doing that more and more, because I just think it adds depth to the story and I want to see more of that. And then in terms of the themes, I mean, naturally with a book like this where we're following a very young character as he kind of goes through his journey into adulthood, there's a lot of discussion around like finding your identity, finding your place. There's also a thread around like destiny, like by his father's own words, is destined to kind of be the future leader of their house, I guess. But he doesn't necessarily want that for himself. He potentially wants to do something else with his life. So there's a question around whether you can ever really change your destiny. And if you do, like what's the cost of that? There's also some really interesting thematic work around like ego. I think any book that has a lot of politics in it, similar to The Folding Knife, that there's a lot of discussion around like knowing yourself and knowing your limits, and what happens when you surpass your limits, and what happens when you go beyond what you know, and the risks that you take when you do that. I love that exploration because it's something that I think about quite a lot, and it's something that I think is particularly captured very well in this book. And then the last thread that I'll talk around is also like, what is the cost of like getting power and getting wealth and getting money, because there's always a cost, right? And to get to a certain level in society where you are calling the shots, like you've had to do things that will impact other people negatively. And then what consequences does that have later on in your life, which I also really liked and thought was done really well. I think in terms of what people might not like about this book, to me, this was genuinely like a perfect book for me, specifically for me, because it's got my favorite character types in it. It's very character driven. It's super political. I love the setting of this world. Like it's very much like Rome or Milan in Renaissance Italy. There's a lot of moving pieces that you also have to kind of keep at the top of your mind as you're progressing throughout the book, which I love doing. I love it when an author kind of treats their reader relatively smartly, and I think Paolo does that in this book. But I caveat that with the fact that it is very slow. Very slow. I got to like 40% in and I still didn't really know where this book was going. Like I really did not. And I'm okay with that because as I mentioned, I kind of trust the process and I kind of trust the author to take me on that journey. But I think for a lot of people who don't like slow books and don't necessarily have that patience or want to wait for that payoff, I think you're going to find this book to be really frustrating. So please do keep that in mind. I think if you're not hooked in by like the 30% mark, just don't keep reading. Like if you're not interested in the world and you're not interested in the characters and you're not interested in where it's going, I would recommend just stopping there. It really does not pick up until the 60-70% mark. And if you're not interested by that point, it's just going to feel like a slog for you. The penultimate thing that I will mention about this book is that while this is historical fantasy, there isn't a ton of magic in this book. If you've seen the cover of this book, which I will also have up here somewhere, there is a dragon's eye on the front cover of the book. I'm not going to mention anything about the dragon's eye because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. But there is some really interesting lore that is built into this world that I really, really enjoyed reading. I really, really hope Paulo considers doing another book in this world. There's so many places he could take it that could be so fascinating to read. But I also feel like this is satisfying enough that we've kind of got this incredible book and like that's it. But I really hope he considers expanding it out. But the lore is really interesting. It's really, really well done. It's really well integrated into the story. And even though we don't necessarily get answers to everything, I felt like we got enough to keep us engaged, but also there's space for this to be expanded upon if the author so wishes to do that. And then the last thing that I will mention that I didn't touch on yet was the world building. I love the world building in this book. It's so good. It's so good. Like, it feels like I'm in Rome or Milan. It feels like I know exactly what the streets look like. It feels like I know exactly what Davico's home looks like. Quite a decent amount of this book is set in Devonacci's office. And I genuinely have like the most vivid image in my head of what his office looks like. So much so that I think I could even direct like an episode set in his office, like genuinely. It's so well done. Like, it really lends itself to somebody who likes kind of playing around with the imagery in their head. And while I don't typically do that for a lot of books, this is the sort of book that really lends itself to it because the world building is almost like a character in itself. It plays a really important part in building up this world, but also how the environment interacts with our characters and how the environment also reflects the progression of the story as well. So overall, this was fantastic. I'm super excited to read more Paulo's books, and I really hope that you consider picking up because I've not heard anybody talk about it, and I think a lot of you who watch my channel in particular would really love it. If you have read it, do let me know down below in the comments because, as I said, apart from my Patreons, I don't know anybody else who has read this book, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't read it and you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below, and I will see you there. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you very, very soon.